Welcome to the Probate Realtor Show, your one source for selling and buying real estate through trust and probate. Hear directly from the best attorneys and trusted advisors on how executors and administrators navigate the probate process in and out of court. Being a personal representative or successor trustee can be a daunting task, and often beneficiaries don't have a clear plan. Let us help you make the right decision for your clients, your family, and your legacy. And now, here's your host, the probate realtor himself, Matias Baker Mazzucci.
Welcome, everybody, to another exciting episode of our show. Today, we are talking to attorney Noelle Minto. Noelle, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Noelle has founded her own firm, which now has 6 attorneys. It's NM Law. She specializes in business and estate planning. Noelle, let's delve right into it. One of the things that I think it's very often misunderstood is the process of business succession, because businesses can be complex. So when somebody comes to you, when a business owner comes to you and they have, what are the steps that you take essentially to understand what should be done for, to plan for their business when in their absence?
Yeah, I mean, I always say begin with the end in mind, right? So it's never too early to start having a conversation about your exit. I can't tell you the number of clients I have that are in their 70s and 80s who have been trying to transition out for more than a decade.
Wow.
And they don't want to leave their employees high and dry. They don't want to leave value or money on the table for their heirs and loved ones. So, there's a lot that can be done. And, I always, you have to sort of make a decision whether your business is suitable for an outside sale to a third party, or if it's possible to really count on sort of legacy where it's going to be inside to either key employees, even considering something like an ESOP, which is an employee, stock option plan where the employees have the equity and they have the drive to make it work. Or is it going to be a family succession? And if it is, you better have that kiddo or niece or nephew in that business, committing to that business way before you ever want to transition out. So that's just a little bit about what we need to be thinking about, before a transition can take place.
Now, it seems like in the, at least, I mean, me as an Italian, the family succession seems like what people are always striving for. It's like, my kids will take over my business. And then obviously things don't necessarily plan out that way. But in that event, so let's say that somebody comes to you with a business and they say, look, I want it to stay within the family. When you're doing the estate planning, so the business is part of, some of this, they could be, LLCs or corporations. What are the steps that somebody has to take to make sure that the succession, I mean, from a legal standpoint, like if you have, multiple signers on accounts and things like that, how do you sort of gather everything and say, okay, these are the things we need to do to make sure that there's continuity within your family?
Right. So if we're focusing just on family succession, I think we need to segregate in our minds business management and business ownership.
Okay.
Because they don't always have to be together. Right. And every business is so different in terms of how it operates and its functionality that you may be able to have the majority or all of the shares or membership units in the case of an LLC continue on, to other family members, either when you retire or when you pass away, with management being a piece of that. Or not at all. So, an example is oftentimes what we'll do is we'll put shares, we'll put non-voting shares in an irrevocable trust for the benefit of children, right? So that's the ownership piece. And we can do that well before there's any death or any retirement. So they're, maybe for estate tax planning reasons or other reasons, asset protection reasons, they're passing on to the next generation. But that does not mean that next generation controls, right? Because they're non-voting shares.
Right.
So they're just along for the ride. And then we continue to have consolidated ownership in key management people, whether it's generation 1, 2, or 3. So we can have, brother number 1 who's, got his MBA running the show with, other brother who's an artist and sister, who's a teacher, reaping the benefit of that on the distribution side. So, that's one of the many, many ways we can sort of slice it and dice it. It's just people need to have they need to have it really clear in their mind who's going to be, minding the store, right?
That makes
Rather than
total sense. That was actually one of the questions that I wanted to ask you. I'm glad that you actually touched upon that, because not all kids are created equal. I have 4 kids, and now they're very small, so I don't know what's going to happen, as far as business succession is concerned. But you have, like you said, some people may be interested in handling the everyday management of the company. They may be really interested in doing that. While some other ones, like you said, an artist, a teacher. So you can distinguish that by, like everybody can take advantage of the income of the company in a certain amount, the net proceeds, shall we say, while those that are involved in the management can also have management compensation, right? That's something that somebody would structure in their plan.
Right. But, I guess 20 years of experience in doing this, and our firm also does a fair amount of trust litigation. I will, share a word to the wise, which is I often hear, rumblings, either during the planning or after the fact. And then, God forbid, we're retained to litigate this matter, right, between siblings. There is a lot of resentment that can exist when you've got somebody, bearing all of the weight on their shoulders, and then siblings are, off in Vegas for the weekend, enjoying this leisurely lifestyle because they're not, grinding to keep the business functioning. Right. So I really, we've got to make it equitable, right, at the next generation down, because a lot of times what I hear from the children who are inheriting the business, right, and maybe other people inherit, let's say, homes or brokerage accounts or things that are, very easily liquidated and don't have to be earned or maintained. And they say, well, God, if I had my, the option to have $5 million cash or a $5 million business that I have to keep running to take, any sort of cash flow from, I would have rather have had that brokerage money. Right. Right. And so we've got to address that. Right. And we've got to make sure that it's fair. We can't have all of them owning the business, right, equally. But then maybe we already build into the succession plan on the business side that they're going to get $1 million a year of, compensation or perquisites, right? Things that are in recognition of all that additional effort. Because my sort of guiding light always in what I do on the planning side, because I was born out of trust litigation in the first 5 years of my practice. And I, just hate not just the inefficiency of the court, but I hate what it does to families. Is my guiding light is, are we going to leave this family intact, right? Or are we setting up a plan that is going to boil over the minute the matriarch or patriarch is no longer there to keep the lid on? We really need to have honest conversations to make sure we're not setting them up for failure, because at the end, only the lawyers are going to win if that happens.
That makes total sense. That's great. Actually having a background in litigation, I guess, helps you to sort of like look at the red flags and say, okay, this is something that, it's easily litigated. This is what happens, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for elucidating on that. That was actually very well explained, and I really appreciate that. One of the things that I've noticed, in this short time that we spent together is that, you really are conscious about the fact that not all estates are created equals. And that's, and that's very, speaks volume as to the way you run your practice. One of the things that you mentioned when we were talking about the business succession, the options is also having like the employees, become owners of the company, et cetera, et cetera. If somebody does not know exactly where the business will go, whether it's prime for a sale or whether they want to give it to the employee, do you help them guide and understand what may be the best options for this particular business?
Yeah, I mean, to the extent I can, right? At the end of the day, I am just the lawyer in the room, right? And there are experts, transition experts, business consultants that really do focus on that, and they know the market, they know what's going on, they know what the multiplier of that particular business is.
Right.
So, I like to share what I see with my other clients, because again, after 20 years, that's the aggregate shared experience that I have with my clients, I like to pass on. But if they really don't know, I think it's probably appropriate to bring in somebody that is a transition expert, at least for them to get their bearings, and then, we can handle it from there. But, I share the war stories, and then hopefully it, it sheds some light on what their options might be.
That makes total sense. So you can, you work in conjunction with experts. If somebody doesn't have, transaction experts or people who do business valuation and things like that, you can certainly point your clients out in the right direction, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's great. Now, we mentioned something, that not all estates are created equal. And one of the things that while I was doing my research is that, you've worked with a variety of clients, including athletes and, YouTube personalities. So how are things different, when somebody has, let's say not that you're unusual, residuals and things like that, or people as work are receiving royalties for certain things. How do you incorporate that, in an estate plan?
To the best, you can, because things are so much more dynamic, I'd say, right? If you're second generation of a manufacturing business, it's things are kind of plugging along. You might have a new large client, that makes the estate slightly larger, or a bad year makes it slightly smaller. But in the case of like an NFL player, if you, for example, win the Super Bowl and get all sorts of endorsements, like your estate could quadruple overnight, right?
Right.
So we can only plan for what we think is sort of reasonably likely. And so beyond catching them, right? Because with travel schedules and everything else, it's always very difficult. So one word is make sure you have a third party authorization for the business manager or whomever, so you can keep things moving forward, is one lesson I've learned. But the other important lesson is, you've got to look at things, I'd say at a minimum every 2 years, with people who are in sports or entertainment. Because sometimes I'm shocked at, oh God, you got this endorsement and now, things have changed, or you've moved to a different state, right? In the case of sports teams, they might get traded and all of a sudden they're in a state that has state estate tax or inheritance tax. So new analysis, every couple of years is probably best practice.
That makes total sense. Another one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is that, you do a lot of community involvement, and I had, as I was reading your bio, you had mentioned about, charitable remainder trust, et cetera, et cetera. So how do you help people that, a lot of people want to do good, but they may not necessarily know exactly how to go about it, both from a tax efficiency standpoint and also from the fact of giving back to the community. So when somebody that is coming to you with an estate plan is thinking, I really want to leave a big chunk of my estate to charity, et cetera, how do you go about, sort of like setting that up for them so that it's beneficial during their lifetime as well? And if they want to take an active involvement into where the money is going, how can you help with that?
So sort of the two sides of that is some clients come in with a very firm idea of where they want to leave their money, right?
Okay.
And other people are really benevolent, but they don't have, a pet charity that they're closely tied to. So when it's the latter, I review grant applications every year for a community foundation.
Okay.
And it is just the number of how many wonderful, small, very tiny issue focused charities there are is astounding to me. I mean, it's really actually quite a heartening experience for me to say, oh, there are good people out in the world doing good work, because with what we see in the news, sometimes it's easy to forget that. And so, I do like to highlight how impactful a gift could be from a client of mine in these organizations that have lean and mean overhead. They're not the popular, glitzy charities that everybody has in their organization. They get a lot of attention. They don't have the big galas, but God, every penny that they give is going to be transformational to a particular community or a particular problem. So I'm always glad to sort of connect them to maybe these unique organizations if they don't already have a good idea of where they want to earmark it. And then, charitable remainder trusts. Now, again, it fluctuates based on tax code and sort of, the formulas that we apply. And that ebbs and flows always, but charitable remainder trusts are my absolute favorite thing to do because it's so symbiotic, right? The clients get such a huge benefit immediately on the initial tax write-off, and then this sort of long-standing benefit to the family. which also, provides just, such a large gift to these charitable organizations. There's also charitable lead trusts. And how I always like to start is we usually involve CPAs, our client CPAs, relatively early, or sometimes they have a financial advisor that's advising them on this. And I like to just do illustrations. I'm a numbers person, so I put it on a spreadsheet. And I know it's exciting to me when I go, oh my gosh, look, this is the net benefit to you. You're going to get, a $1.6 million write-off this year to offset whatever gain you have. And then at the end of the day, your family's going to get all this money back, so I just like to speak through the numbers. If that makes sense. I sound a little dorky when I say that, but it's motivating to me. So.
No, it makes total sense. It makes total sense. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to. I mean, people are interested in seeing, where is the money going, et cetera, et cetera. Another question that I wanted to ask, and I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot with this question, because I know the obvious answer. So because you have a background in litigation, in order to preserve family harmony in estate planning, the answer that I often get is communication. Apart from communication, so that's the question that it's a little bit, what else can somebody do to make sure that family harmony is preserved through the estate planning process?
Okay. So, I think acknowledging the demons, or shortcomings of your children and calling them out in the document itself. And not to say, oh, this person's selfish, right? But I just mean, if they have a drug addiction, then we need drug testing language in the document, right? If we know they have a gambling issue, if we know that they have an issue with, suing, right? I had a case where the sister had sued on 3 family members' estates. Hello.
Oh, wow.
It's like we could see the writing on the wall, right? And so I like to speak through evidence, or what can be evidence, right? And so you build your file to combat any potential challenges. And you can only do that through communication, by the way, because the client needs to say, hey, here's what's going on. I have to have complete honesty so that I know what the issues are, because I cannot read my client's mind. And they know best if they're being honest. And then I can say, you need to go to the doctor. You need to get a letter that says X. You need to put it in the file, and it needs to be as close to the signing date as possible, so that we have a fortified file here. Because if you die in 27 years, I can't go back and get a medical opinion on what happened 27 years ago. Were they in the right mind? Were they not? What medications were they taking? And so that's just one example. And again, that's maybe the litigation background, where I think if I were litigating this case and I wanted to make sure that my trust was upheld in court, what is the judge going to need to see, right? And how can I have that all queued up so that when I get a little nastygram from, the attorney from, spoiled sister number 2, I can say, have at it. Here's 17 ways we're going to defeat that, right? Rather than just a lot of puffery, which is typically not how I work.
That's wonderful. I love that. Very nice and very well explained. Let me ask you a question. What was the reason you moved away from litigation? You seem like, from the short conversation we've had, like somebody who would be in court, doing very well. I do talk to a lot of attorneys. I spend quite a bit of time in probate court, confirming real estate sales. So what made you decide to move away from litigation?
Oh, that's an easy one. I like to work with intelligent people making rational decisions, which is not always really trust litigation is the other family litigation, right? And it's even more emotional or triggering for people because we're talking sibling rivalries that might have started at the age of 5 because, you got the better toy. And I really, really disdain the inefficiency of court. Everything I do, I like to do for maximum efficiency. And you just can't, you can't do that. And I just feel this is so much more rewarding is I'm shielding my clients from ever having to go through that because I personally hate it so much. Right. So I just feel like I can accomplish more in this venue. And I I feel deeply saddened when people have to go through litigation. I mean, I really try and do everything I can to keep them out.
That is wonderfully explained, and I totally understand. If anybody, I always make this joke. Sometimes probate court, it's like an episode of Jerry Springer. I have honestly seen that.
Yes,
Like, mom sent you to medical school. They didn't send me to medical school.
exactly.
It's like things like that. So if you haven't seen it, it's hard to believe it, but that's really what's taking place in court a lot of the time.
Right.
Um, I'm so fascinated by your journey. Let's talk about where did you grow up?
Actually, well, I was born, if you want to go way back, my dad was studying for the bar exam at UCLA. I was born at UCLA student housing.
Wow.
And so basically born and raised in LA, and then moved to Orange County after college. I went to school on the East Coast and have been back here more or less, although I referenced to you that I did have a stint in Italy and
That's right.
lived in Europe for several years on and off. But in the US, California is my home.
That's wonderful. And you speak Italian, which is something that I definitely want to highlight, and Spanish and French, which is
Yes.
wonderful.
Yes. French is I need to take a trip. It's quite a bit rusty, but I use my Italian with my kids a little bit. So it's not totally gone by the wayside.
That's great. That's great. I'm the same boat when it comes to French. It's the only language that I actually studied in school, and it's the language that I speak the least. Spanish, it's very easy to exercise every day. I talk Spanish, so that one just keeps getting better. Um, Let me ask you about the decision you made to become an attorney. When did you know that you wanted to be an attorney? I know you just revealed to us that your dad was an attorney. He's an attorney. So, what happened?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a roundabout way because I have an undergrad degree in international affairs and
Okay.
I was studying to be a diplomat. And I sort of looked at, what is the most likely or well-used degree of diplomats? And over 30% of diplomats have law degrees, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than a specific master's or PhD. And so I said, okay,
Right.
I'll do that because that's good sort of general analysis and so on. And so that was still my plan, even as I graduated law school. But of course, there was this amazingly huge law school debt and I needed to take a break. And so I just decided to do private practice. And then,
Mm-hmm.
I really fell in love with it. But I do think the tenets of just the big picture problem solving is something I do, but I do it in a much smaller context, right? And a much more solvable issue than, something like a global warming or economic development of the southern cone of South America, right? These are big issues that you spend a lifetime and may not resolve, whereas I can get resolution for my clients. So it's a little more satisfying.
That's wonderful. So you started right after law school. You went into private practice, and did you open your firm right away?
Oh, no. I worked actually for another firm down here in Newport Beach. And in fact, I got the job before I even passed the bar exam. So I called because I knew I wanted to work in trust and estates and business
Mm-hmm.
transactions day one. Because
Wow.
again, rational people making intelligent decisions, right?
Yeah.
And so I called the firm and I said, here's why I think I'd be an asset. I want to be in the door. We'll negotiate later when I get my bar results. But right now, this is where I want to be and this is what I want to do. And they said, we're not really hiring for that position, but we like your tenacity. So come on in. And that's how I got my first job.
That's great. That's wonderful. Noelle, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. Before I let you go, though, I want to do my back of the business card. So I want you to pick a number, if you indulge me, between 1 and 30.
All right. Let's see. I'm going to go for, do I tell you what the number is?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
tell
Number
me.
17.
17. Oh my God, look. Why were you given your name? That's the
Okay.
question. That's question number 17.
All
That's
right.
funny.
Well, my name is Noelle. It's obviously, so it's French. And I was supposed to be born on Christmas. I was not. I was very late. But my parents did not come up with the name. So my grandfather, who was French, suggested Noelle, and they said, that's great. We'll stick with that. So that's how I got my name. My mother's father named me, and they just grabbed at it because it was that or nothing at that stage.
That is awesome. Okay, one more. Pick one more number for me between 1 and 30.
Let's go unlucky number 13.
13, okay. Has reading a book ever changed your life?
Ooh, gosh. I mean, in the aggregate, they have, right? Through this thing called knowledge. But yeah, I think so. I think there are a few books that have really just kept it with me. I mean, I could dork out on a lot of business administration books that I read, right? Being the, the managing partner here. But on a more personal level, I would say I really liked Catcher in the Rye. I mean, there are so many that I really feel like were transformational. I read them at the right time, right? Where they meant something to me in my youth. So yes, a lot of them.
That's great. That's wonderful. And what is the title that stands out? Nonfiction. Catcher in the Rye for fiction. I'll take that. I love that book as well. Give me a nonfiction title that stands out to you when you think about it.
Well, okay. Again, I really feel like I need to get a life when I say this, but I think from a business administration perspective, Traction was really useful for me.
Nice.
Adam Grant's Think Again, which is, just again, sort of looking at things with curiosity and understanding that, we're not these overly confident or, we don't have imposter syndrome, kind of being somewhere in the middle where you stay curious. And many, many more. I'll stop there.
I love it. Okay, that's wonderful. That's really great. Now, one last thing before I let you go. Anybody that needs to get a hold of you that listens to this interview and is interested in hiring your firm, what is the best way to reach you?
They're always free to email me. It's noelle@mintocounselors.com or call 949-253-0000. That's our Orange County office.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Grazie, Matias.
Prego. We didn't even talk a little Italian. Let's just sign off in Italian. Grazie a tutti. Ciao.
Ciao.
Thank you for listening to the Probate Realtor Show. Find more episodes and interact with us at probaterealtor.la. That's probaterealtor.la. Listen, ask questions, and get results. Don't forget to like and subscribe. The Probate Realtor Matias Baker Mazzucci is a licensed real estate broker in California, DRE number 020547763. Any legal information provided is for informational purposes only and not for the purpose of providing legal advice. Contact an attorney to obtain advice with respect to any particular legal issue or problem. We make no guarantees as to the accuracy of any information. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.